The gunshot outside the Silver Dollar Saloon made Katherine Blackburn flinch, but she didn't dare show it as she stood alone against the wall, watching the dancers whirl across the dusty floor of Sweetwater, Wyoming's only dance hall. It was 1883, and she had come too far to appear weak now. The April evening had brought most of the town together to celebrate the arrival of spring after a harsh winter. Lantern light cast golden shadows across the room, illuminating the faces of ranchers, shopkeepers, and cowboys who had come to socialize after months of isolation. The musicians in the corner played a lively tune on fiddle and piano, while couples twirled in time with the music. Katherine smoothed the front of her blue calico dress, the nicest she owned, though it was a few years out of fashion. 6 months ago, she had arrived in Sweetwater with nothing but a small carpetbag of possessions and a determination to make a new life for herself after her father's death left her with mounting debts back in Boston. Now she worked as the schoolteacher in the one-room schoolhouse at the edge of town. At 22, she was neither the youngest nor the prettiest woman in the room, but she carried herself with a quiet dignity that had earned her respect among the townsfolk. Still, she remained an outsider in many ways, too educated for some, too independent for others. "Miss Blackburn don't dance with just anyone," she overheard Mrs. Patterson tell her husband nearby. "Thinks she's too good for the likes of our Wyoming men." Katherine bit her lip. It wasn't true. She simply hadn't been asked by anyone she felt comfortable with. Several of the older ranchers had approached her earlier, their breath heavy with whiskey, but she had politely declined. From across the room, she felt a pair of eyes on her. Kade Fletcher stood with a group of cowboys by the bar, his tall frame easy to spot in the crowd. He worked as the foreman at the Double Bar Ranch outside of town, and Katherine had seen him occasionally when he came in for supplies or to attend Sunday services. He had never spoken to her directly, but she had noticed him watching her before. Unlike the other cowboys in their worn clothes and dusty boots, Kade wore a clean white shirt beneath his vest, and his dark hair was neatly combed back. There was something in his stance that spoke of confidence without arrogance. When their eyes met, Katherine quickly looked away, feeling a flush creep up her neck. The music changed to a slower tune, and couples moved closer together on the dance floor. Katherine contemplated slipping outside for some fresh air when a commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention. 4 men entered, led by Emmett Walsh, a cattle baron known for his ruthless business practices. He owned the largest ranch in the territory and had been trying to buy out smaller operations for years. Rumor had it he didn't always play fair. "Evening, folks," Walsh called out, his voice carrying over the music. "Don't stop the festivities on my account." The musicians resumed playing, but the mood had shifted. Walsh made his way through the crowd, greeting people with a forced joviality that few returned genuinely. When his gaze landed on Katherine, a smile spread across his face that made her stomach tighten. "Miss Blackburn," he said, approaching her. "You're looking lovely this evening. May I have this dance?" Before she could respond, Walsh reached for her hand. Katherine took a step back, pressing herself against the wall. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Walsh, but I'm not dancing this evening," she said firmly. Walsh's smile hardened. "Now, don't be unfriendly. A pretty lady shouldn't be standing alone at a dance." "I believe the lady declined," came a deep voice from behind Walsh. Kade Fletcher had crossed the floor so quietly that Katherine hadn't noticed his approach. He stood tall beside Walsh, his expression calm but resolute. Walsh turned slowly. "This isn't your concern, Fletcher." "She's mine," Kade said simply, his eyes never leaving Walsh's face. "For this dance, at least." The statement hung in the air between them. Katherine's breath caught in her throat as she looked between the two men. Everyone nearby had gone quiet, watching the confrontation unfold. Walsh assessed Kade for a long moment before backing away with a cold laugh. "Didn't know the schoolmarm had taken up with a ranch hand. Interesting choice, Miss Blackburn." After Walsh rejoined his men at the bar, Kade turned to Katherine. Up close, she could see the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes and the small scar that cut through his right eyebrow. "I apologize for speaking for you," he said quietly. "Walsh doesn't take rejection well, and I thought it might be easier if he believed you were already spoken for." Thank you, Katherine replied, finding her voice. That was kind of you. Kade offered her his hand. Since I've already claimed this dance, would you do me the honor of making it true? Katherine hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. I'm not very practiced, I'm afraid. Just follow my lead, he said with a gentle smile that transformed his usually serious face. As he led her onto the dance floor, Katherine was aware of the curious stares following them. Kade placed one hand respectfully at her waist while holding her other hand firmly in his. His touch was warm through the fabric of her dress. I've wanted to introduce myself properly for some time, he said as they began to move with the music. I'm Kade Fletcher, Katherine Blackburn, she replied, though she knew he was already aware of her name. You work at the Double Bar. He nodded. Foreman for going on 3 years now. You're not from Sweetwater originally. No, madam. Came up from Texas after the war. Been working cattle most of my life. Katherine found herself relaxing as they continued to dance. Kade moved with surprising grace for such a tall man, guiding her effortlessly across the floor. And you? He asked. What brought a Boston lady to our little corner of Wyoming? Katherine raised an eyebrow. How did you know I'm from Boston? A slight smile touched his lips. Your accent gives you away. Not as pronounced as when you first arrived, but still there. I needed a fresh start, she said simply, not wanting to delve into the painful details of her father's gambling debts and the scandal that had followed. Kade nodded, not pressing further. Sweetwater's lucky to have you. I've heard good things about what you're doing at the school. The dance ended too soon for Katherine's liking. As the music faded, Kade stepped back and gave her a small bow. Thank you for the dance, Miss Blackburn. Katherine, she corrected him impulsively. You can call me Katherine, his smile widened. Katherine then, and I'm Kade to my friends. From the corner of her eye, Katherine could see Walsh watching them with undisguised displeasure. She felt a flutter of unease. Would you mind walking me home? She asked Kade quietly. I live just behind the schoolhouse. Understanding dawned in his eyes as he glanced toward Walsh. It would be my pleasure. After retrieving her shawl, Katherine left the dance hall on Kade's arm. The night air was cool and fresh after the stuffy interior, and the streets of Sweetwater were quiet except for the occasional burst of laughter from the saloon. Walsh has been causing trouble for a lot of folks around here, Kade said as they walked. Trying to buy up land for his railroad friends. The school board mentioned something about that, Katherine replied. They're worried about losing funding if too many families move away. It's more than that. There have been incidents, fences cut, cattle scattered. Nothing that can be traced back to Walsh directly, but everyone knows. They reached the small cabin behind the schoolhouse where Katherine lived. A lamp burned in the window where she had left it lit before departing for the dance. Thank you for the escort, she said, pausing at the steps. And for the rescue earlier. Kade removed his hat, holding it respectfully in his hands. May I call on you sometime? Properly, I mean. Katherine felt a warmth spread through her chest. I would like that. Sunday, after church services, she nodded. Sunday would be fine. He smiled again, replacing his hat. Good night, Katherine. Good night, Kade. Katherine watched him walk away, his tall figure silhouetted against the moonlit street. For the first time since arriving in Sweetwater, she felt something like hope taking root inside her. Sunday seemed an eternity away. Katherine went through her daily routines at the schoolhouse, teaching the children of farmers and townspeople with her usual dedication, but her thoughts frequently drifted to Kade Fletcher and their dance. She wondered if she had imagined the connection between them. When Sunday finally arrived, Katherine took extra care with her appearance, wearing her best dress and arranging her honey-brown hair in a style that softened her features. The church service seemed longer than usual, and she found herself stealing glances at Kade, who sat with some of the Double Bar Ranch hands several pews behind her. After the service, as people gathered outside to socialize, Kade approached her. He wore his Sunday best, and Katherine noticed several young women watching him with interest. Good morning, Miss Blackburn, he said formally, mindful of their public setting. I hope you're well today. Very well, thank you, Mr. Fletcher, she replied with equal propriety. I thought we might take a walk if you're agreeable. Katherine nodded, and they strolled away from the church toward the town's small park. Once they were out of earshot of the congregation, Kade's formal demeanor relaxed. "I've been looking forward to this all week," he admitted. "As have I," Katherine confessed, surprising herself with her candor. They walked for over an hour, talking easily about their lives. Katherine learned that Kade had fought briefly for the Confederacy as a very young man, an experience he spoke of reluctantly. After the war, he had worked his way west, taking whatever jobs he could find until he discovered his talent for managing cattle operations. In turn, Katherine told him about growing up in Boston, her education at a women's college, and her father's death, though she omitted the circumstances surrounding it. "How long do you plan to stay in Sweetwater?" Kade asked as they circled back toward town. "I signed a contract with the school board for 2 years," she replied. "After that, I'm not certain." "It's a hard place sometimes," he said, looking out at the rolling hills that surrounded the town. "But there's beauty here too, if you know where to look." Their Sunday walks became a regular occurrence. Each week, Katherine would meet Kade after church services, and they would stroll through town, sometimes stopping at the small cafe for coffee. Occasionally, they would ride out to the surrounding countryside, Kade on his own horse and Katherine on a gentle mare borrowed from the livery stable. During one such ride in late May, they stopped by a creek lined with cottonwood trees. While their horses grazed nearby, they sat on a fallen log and shared the lunch Katherine had packed. "I've never known anyone quite like you," Kade said, watching as she pointed out different wildflowers growing along the bank. "Most women out here are either born to the land or can't wait to leave it." "And where do I fit?" she asked, curious about his assessment. He considered her for a moment. "Neither. You're making your own place." Katherine smiled, pleased by his understanding. "My father wanted me to marry well and settle into Boston society. When that possibility vanished with his debts, I realized I could choose my own path." "Do you regret coming west?" She shook her head. "No. Despite everything, I feel more myself here than I ever did in Boston." A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the water flowing over the rocks. Katherine was acutely aware of Kade beside her, his shoulder nearly touching hers. "Katherine," he said finally, his voice low, "I should tell you something." The seriousness in his tone made her turn to face him. "What is it?" "Walsh has been making inquiries about you in town, asking questions about your past, your situation in Boston." A cold feeling settled in her stomach. Why would he do that? I'm not sure. But he's a man who uses information to get what he wants. Katherine stood abruptly, walking a few steps away. Her past wasn't a secret exactly, but the details of her father's gambling and subsequent suicide were humiliating. She had come to Wyoming hoping to leave that shame behind. "Katherine," Kade said, following her, "whatever it is, it doesn't matter to me." She turned to look at him, searching his face for judgment and finding none. "My father killed himself," she said bluntly. "After gambling away our family fortune and home, there was a scandal. People who had been friends for years suddenly wouldn't receive us. I came here because no one would hire me to teach their children in Boston." Kade stepped closer, his expression softening. "I'm sorry, that must have been difficult." "It was," she acknowledged, "but I've made peace with it. I just don't want it following me here." "Walsh is unlikely to let it go if he thinks he can use it somehow," Kade warned. "He's been pressuring the school board about selling the land where the schoolhouse sits, says the railroad needs it for a depot." Katherine frowned. "They can't sell it. That land was deeded specifically for educational purposes. Legal details don't always matter much out here," Kade said grimly, "especially when someone has money and influence." The peaceful afternoon was spoiled by the conversation. They rode back to town in thoughtful silence, both considering the implications of Walsh's interest in Katherine's past. At the livery stable, Kade helped her down from the mare, his hands lingering at her waist for a moment longer than necessary. Katherine looked up at him, struck by the concern in his eyes. "We should be careful," she said softly. "Both of us. Walsh doesn't seem like a man who forgives easily." Kade nodded, but there was a determined set to his jaw. "I won't let him threaten you, Katherine." "It's not just me I'm worried about," she admitted. "Your position at the double bar, some things are worth risking a job for," he interrupted, his gaze intense. Katherine's heart beat faster at his words and the meaning behind them. Before she could respond, Kade bent down and brushed his lips against hers in a brief, gentle kiss that nonetheless left her breathless. "I'll see you on Sunday," he said, stepping back. Katherine could only nod, her fingers unconsciously touching her lips as she watched him mount his horse and ride away. The next few weeks brought escalating tensions in Sweetwater. Walsh continued to press for land sales, focusing particularly on the school property and several small ranches whose owners were struggling after the harsh winter. Rumors circulated that the railroad was offering good prices, but those who sold found the terms less favorable than promised once the contracts were signed. Katherine faced her own challenges when two members of the school board visited her one evening. Mr. Hollister, the bank manager, and Mrs. Porter, the mayor's wife, sat uncomfortably in her small parlor as they explained their concerns. "We've heard some troubling things about your background, Miss Blackburn," Mr. Hollister began, avoiding her gaze. "What sort of things?" Katherine asked calmly, though her hands trembled slightly in her lap. "About your father's situation in Boston," Mrs. Porter said delicately, "and the circumstances of your departure." Katherine took a deep breath. "My father experienced financial difficulties and took his own life. I came west seeking employment. I've never hidden these facts, though I don't speak of them publicly out of respect for his memory." "Of course," Mrs. Porter said quickly, "but you understand our concern." "The children have received an excellent education under my care," Katherine interrupted firmly. "My personal history has no bearing on my abilities as a teacher." Mr. Hollister cleared his throat. "There's also the matter of your friendship with Mr. Fletcher." Katherine stiffened. "I wasn't aware that my personal associations were the school board's concern." "Ordinarily, they wouldn't be," he conceded. "But given the current situation with Mr. Walsh and his interest in the school property, some feel that your connection to someone from a competing ranch might appear." "Political, I see," Katherine said coldly. "And does Mr. Walsh have a representative on the school board now?" The uncomfortable glance exchanged between her visitors confirmed her suspicion. "Not officially," Mrs. Porter admitted. "But he has made a very generous offer to fund a new schoolhouse in another location if we sell this property to the railroad. And if I continue my friendship with Mr. Fletcher," Mr. Hollister sighed, "the board would need to reconsider your contract for next term." After they left, Katherine sat alone in her small cabin, anger and fear warring within her. She had worked too hard to establish herself in Sweetwater to be driven away now. Yet the thought of ending her relationship with Kade was equally unpalatable. The next day, Katherine was teaching her students about geography when the classroom door opened. Emmett Walsh stood there, his expensive suit and gold watch chain marking him as distinctly out of place in the simple schoolhouse. "Mr. Walsh," Katherine acknowledged, maintaining her composure despite her surprise. "We're in the middle of lessons." "My apologies, Miss Blackburn," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I was hoping for a word with you after school hours." "I'm available at 4 o'clock when classes end," she replied coolly. Walsh nodded and departed, leaving Katherine to resume teaching with a sense of dread weighing on her shoulders. At 4 o'clock, after the last student had left, Walsh returned. He strolled around the classroom, examining the maps and books with casual interest. "You've done well for yourself here," he commented. "Considering your circumstances when you arrived." Katherine remained standing behind her desk. "What can I do for you, Mr. Walsh?" He turned to face her directly. "I'll be blunt, Miss Blackburn. I want this land, and I'm prepared to be generous to get it. The school board is receptive to my offer, but your opposition has been noted. This land was deeded for educational purposes," she said firmly. "It's not for sale." "Everything has a price," Walsh countered, "including, I imagine, your silence about certain matters back in Boston." Katherine felt a chill run through her. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Walsh?" "Not at all," he said, his tone conversational. "Merely pointing out that a young woman in your position might prefer discretion. Your relationship with Fletcher, for instance, has raised eyebrows. Small towns can be so judgmental. My friendship with Mr. Fletcher is hardly scandalous," Katherine replied, though her heart raced at his implication. Walsh laughed. "Friendship? Is that what you call it? The man's been telling his fellow cowboys that you're his woman. She's mine, I believe, were his exact words at the dance. Katherine kept her expression neutral, though Walsh's words struck home. Kade had said those words to protect her, but hearing them quoted back made her wonder if they held deeper meaning for him as well. My personal life is not relevant to the school board's decision about this property, she said firmly. Perhaps not directly, Walsh conceded, but your reputation certainly affects your position here. A teacher with a questionable past, involved with a ranch hand known for his temper. People might wonder about your judgment. Kade Fletcher is the most honorable man I've ever met, Katherine said, unable to keep the anger from her voice. Walsh's eyes narrowed. So it is like that. Interesting. He moved toward the door but paused before leaving. Consider my words carefully, Miss Blackburn. I can make things very difficult for you and your cowboy friend, or I can be quite generous to those who cooperate. After he left, Katherine sank into her chair, trembling with a mixture of rage and fear. Walsh's veiled threats were clear enough. He would use her father's suicide and her growing relationship with Kade to undermine her position in the community if she continued to oppose the sale of the school property. That evening, Katherine was grading papers when a knock came at her door. She opened it to find Kade standing there, his expression grim. "You've heard," she said, stepping back to let him enter. "About Walsh's visit. Yes, news travels fast." He removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "Are you all right?" "I'm angry," she admitted, "and worried. He all but threatened to spread rumors about my father and us." Kade's jaw tightened. "He's trying to isolate you, make you feel you have no choice but to give in." "It's working," Katherine said softly. "The school board is already questioning my suitability as a teacher because of my friendship with you." Kade's expression faltered. "Katherine, I never meant to cause problems for you." She moved closer to him, placing her hand on his arm. "You haven't. Walsh is the problem, not you." "What did he say exactly?" Katherine hesitated, then decided on honesty. "He quoted what you said at the dance, about me being yours." A flush crept up Kade's neck. "I said that to get him to back off." "I know," she assured him quickly, "but he's using it to imply that that our relationship is improper." Kade set his hat down and took her hands in his. "There's nothing improper about how I feel about you, Katherine. I care for you deeply. More than I've cared for anyone in a long time." The sincerity in his voice made her heart swell. "I care for you too," she whispered. "Then let's not let Walsh drive us apart. That's what he wants." Katherine nodded, drawing strength from Kade's resolve. "What should we do?" "I've been talking to some of the other ranchers," Kade said. "Walsh has been making similar moves against several properties. We're gathering evidence of his tactics, threats, damaged property, forged documents. If we can prove he's operating illegally, we can take it to the territorial judge." "That could take months," Katherine pointed out. "The school board is meeting next week to vote on his offer." Kade's expression turned thoughtful. "Then we need to change the stakes, make the school property less attractive to him somehow." They spent the evening discussing possibilities, and by the time Kade left, they had the beginnings of a plan. It was risky, but with Walsh closing in from all sides, they had few options left. The next day, Katherine visited Mr. Hollister at the bank. As she expected, he was reluctant to speak with her at first, but his professional courtesy won out. "I understand the school board is considering Mr. Walsh's offer," she began once they were seated in his office. "That's a board matter, Miss Blackburn," he replied stiffly. "I shouldn't discuss it." "I'm not asking about the board's deliberations," Katherine clarified. "I'm inquiring about the legality of selling land that was specifically deeded for educational purposes." Mr. Hollister shifted uncomfortably. "Well, that's complicated. The deed does specify educational use, but circumstances change, and with the right legal procedures. And who would determine those procedures?" Katherine interrupted. "The territorial judge, perhaps." A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. "Eventually, yes, though Mr. Walsh's lawyers have assured us." "I'm sure they have," Katherine said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But I wonder if they've mentioned that Judge Harmon is my father's cousin." This was a blatant lie. Katherine had no family connections in Wyoming territory, but Mr. Hollister wouldn't know that. His eyes widened slightly. I wasn't aware of that relationship, he said cautiously. It's not something I advertise, Katherine replied, but I received a letter from him recently expressing his interest in visiting Sweetwater this summer. I'm sure he would be fascinated by the legal questions surrounding the school property. She let the implication hang in the air between them. Mr. Hollister tugged at his collar, visibly uncomfortable. I'll bring this information to the board's attention, he said finally. Though I can't promise it will change the outcome of the vote. Of course not, Katherine agreed pleasantly. I simply thought everyone should have all the relevant facts before making such an important decision. As she left the bank, Katherine felt a twinge of guilt about the deception. But it was balanced by the knowledge that she was fighting for something important, not just her position or the school, but the future of Sweetwater itself. Meanwhile, Kade was implementing his part of their plan. He rode to several neighboring ranches, speaking with owners who had also been pressured by Walsh. By the end of the day, he had gathered signed statements from 3 ranchers describing specific threats and incidents of property damage that coincided with Walsh's land acquisition attempts. The day before the school board meeting, Kade and Katherine met at the creek where they had shared lunch weeks earlier. They compared notes on their progress and finalized their strategy. Hollister seemed shaken by the mention of a judge, Katherine reported, though I feel terrible about lying. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, Kade said, though he looked troubled. I got statements from the Millers, Johnsons, and Old Man Cartwright, all documented incidents that point to Walsh, though none can prove it directly. Katherine sighed, gazing out at the water. It might not be enough. There's something else, Kade said hesitantly, something I've been considering that might change everything. She turned to look at him, curious. What is it? Marriage, he said simply. Katherine stared at him, certain she had misheard. I beg your pardon. Kade took her hands in his expression earnest. Hear me out. As a single woman teaching school, your position is vulnerable. But as a married woman, especially one married to a man with connections to multiple ranches in the area, you'd have more protection. You're proposing marriage as a strategy, Katherine asked, trying to keep the hurt from her voice. Kade's face softened. No, Katherine, I'm proposing marriage because I love you. I have since that first dance when you looked at me with those fearless eyes. The timing may be driven by circumstances, but my feelings are real. Katherine's breath caught in her throat. Kade, you don't have to answer now, he said quickly. It's sudden, I know, but I wanted you to know where I stand. Whatever happens with Walsh and the school board, my feelings won't change. Tears welled in Katherine's eyes. I love you too, she whispered. But marriage, it's such a big step. It is, he agreed. And under different circumstances, I would court you properly for months before asking. But we don't have that luxury right now. Katherine looked down at their joined hands, her mind racing. She had come to Wyoming seeking independence, determined to make her own way without relying on anyone else. Yet in Kade, she had found a partner who respected her strength rather than seeking to diminish it. Yes, she said finally, meeting his gaze. I'll marry you, Kade Fletcher, not as a strategy, but because I love you too. His face broke into a smile so radiant it took her breath away. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left no doubt about his feelings. When? She asked when they finally parted. Today, he said firmly. If you're willing. The Reverend can marry us this evening, then we can face the school board together tomorrow. Katherine's practical nature asserted itself. What about your position at the double bar, and where would we live? I've been saving to buy my own place, Kade revealed. It's a small ranch, nothing fancy, but the previous owner couldn't make a go of it and sold cheap. I was waiting until I had things more settled before telling you. Katherine looked at him in surprise. You've bought land, signed the papers last week, he confirmed. It's about 5 miles north of town. Good water, decent grazing, needs work, but it's ours if you want it. Ours, she repeated, testing the word and finding she liked the sound of it. Yes, I want it. That evening, in the small church where they had first begun their Sunday walks, Katherine and Kade exchanged vows before Reverend Thomas and 2 hastily gathered witnesses, the Reverend's wife and the town doctor, who happened to be visiting when they arrived. Katherine wore her blue calico dress, the same one she had worn to the dance where they first met. Kade had no ring to give her, but promised to buy one as soon as they visited the larger town of Cheyenne. It didn't matter to Katherine. The words they spoke meant more than any gold band. After the brief ceremony, they walked together to Katherine's cabin. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges with the school board meeting, but tonight belonged to them alone. "Mrs. Fletcher," Kade said softly as they reached her door, "are you ready to begin our life together?" Katherine smiled up at him, her heart full. "More than ready, Mr. Fletcher." The school board meeting the next day was held in the town hall, a simple building that served multiple purposes in Sweetwater. Katherine and Kade arrived together, causing a stir among the townsfolk who had gathered to observe the proceedings. "Is it true?" Mrs. Porter asked as Katherine took a seat in the front row. "You and Mr. Fletcher were married yesterday." "It is," Katherine confirmed calmly. The Reverend performed the ceremony. The news spread through the room in whispers. Katherine could see Walsh in the corner, speaking intently with his lawyer, his expression dark. When the meeting was called to order, Mr. Hollister looked distinctly uncomfortable as he outlined Walsh's proposal to purchase the school property for the railroad. "Before we vote," Katherine said, standing when public comments were invited, "I would like to present some information relevant to this decision." She approached the table where the board members sat and placed before them copies of the statements Kade had collected from neighboring ranchers. These are sworn testimonies from local property owners who have experienced threats and vandalism after refusing to sell their land to Mr. Walsh or his associates, she explained. "I believe they establish a pattern of intimidation that should concern anyone considering business dealings with him." Walsh surged to his feet. "This is slander. I'll sue for defamation. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation, Mr. Walsh," Katherine replied evenly. "And each of these statements is sworn and notarized. Furthermore," Kade added, joining Katherine at the front of the room, "I've taken the liberty of telegraphing the territorial governor about these matters. His office has expressed interest in investigating claims of illegal land acquisition practices in Sweetwater." This was another calculated bluff, but delivered with such conviction that murmurs of concern spread through the audience. "This is ridiculous," Walsh sputtered. "The railroad needs this land for progress for the future of Sweetwater." "The future of Sweetwater depends on education just as much as railroads," Katherine countered. "And as it happens, my husband and I have an alternative proposal." She nodded to Kade, who addressed the board directly. "I recently purchased the old Thornton property north of town," he explained. "Katherine and I are willing to donate 5 acres of that land for a new schoolhouse, should the town decide one is needed. That location would actually be more central to the outlying farms and ranches than the current site." The board members exchanged surprised glances. This unexpected development changed the equation entirely. "That's quite generous," Mr. Hollister said finally. "The board would need to consider such an offer carefully." "Of course," Katherine agreed. "In the meantime, I hope you'll also consider the legal complications of selling the current school property, given the specific terms of its deed." The meeting continued for another hour, with Walsh making increasingly desperate arguments for his proposal. In the end, the board voted to table the decision pending further legal review and consideration of the Fletcher's land offer. As they left the town hall, Walsh intercepted them on the street, his face flushed with anger. "You think you've won," he said in a low voice. "But this isn't over. Nobody crosses me and gets away with it." "It is over, Walsh," Kade replied firmly. "Your tactics might work on individuals, but not on a community that stands together." Walsh's gaze shifted to Katherine. "And you, so quick to marry a cowboy to save your position. What would your Boston friends think of that?" Katherine met his gaze steadily. "They would think I'm the luckiest woman in the world, and they would be right." Taking Kade's arm, she walked away from Walsh without a backward glance. 1 year later, Katherine stood at the window of their ranch house, watching as Kade worked with a new colt in the corral. The past 12 months had brought many changes to Sweetwater. Walsh had eventually sold his holdings and moved on after the territorial governor launched an official investigation into his business practices. The school had remained in its original location, with Katherine continuing as teacher. Their donation of land had instead been used for a new church and community gathering place that served the outlying ranches. As for Katherine and Kade, their hasty marriage had blossomed into a deep and abiding love. The small ranch was beginning to prosper under Kade's careful management, and Katherine had discovered unexpected happiness in her role as both teacher and rancher's wife. She placed a hand on her slightly rounded belly, smiling at the secret she would share with Kade that evening. Their family would grow by one come winter. Outside, Kade looked up and caught sight of her at the window. He waved, his smile as warm as it had been the first time he'd crossed the dance floor to claim her. Katherine waved back, her heart full. She had come west seeking independence and had found something even more precious, a partnership of equals, built on love and respect. Together, they had stood against those who would threaten their community, and together they would build a future neither could have imagined when they first met. As Kade walked toward the house, Katherine moved to meet him at the door. He was dusty and tired from his work with the horses, but his eyes lit up at the sight of her. "She's mine," he had said that night at the dance, words spoken as a strategy but which had become a beautiful truth. They belonged to each other now, by choice and by love, in a bond that would endure whatever challenges the frontier might bring.